Social Music Talk. Social Music Talk with Alex Cosper, Sam Kadura, Michael Halloran. We're just talking about the good old days of alternative radio, which to me was the 90s.
I don't know why you say good old days of alternative, because to me it's when, and you know, we should have talked about this in the last segment last week or whatever it was that it was on, but the issue was that there was, and I think it's Ted Volk brings this up, there was the original 7 pure stations, which were the ones that started
Jonathan
the
Rosen calls it the Dirty Dozen, so he extends it to include the one in Phoenix,
of course,
the AM station in
that
Phoenix.
he programmed.
Right.
But the original 7, the Pure 7 or the Pure 5 or whatever Ted Volk called it, the concept was it was the stations that started it in these markets, kept going, LIR, 91X, K-Rock, Live 105, I think was in on it.
Definitely.
What else was there?
Well, Portland came later, KNRK
Wasn't
in
Portland.
Portland.
It wasn't Portland he was talking about. It was whatever.
Oh, you mean that the first 7 before it all exploded?
Before it all exploded. Before
Yeah.
it turned into 150.
I think you just named them all. K-Rock, 91X, the San Francisco station, Live 105, and that's 3.
Like Dallas.
There was WHFS in Washington, D.C.
Right, HFS, and then and whatever it was.
BCN in Boston, would that count?
I don't remember what he. I'll have to text him and ask him one day who the original 7, the Pure 7.
And you think the Edge in Dallas counts?
It did back then because it started prior to the Nirvana breakthrough, and Ted was working at Geffen at the time. But the reason I bring it up is because my theory is, and I don't know whether you guys will agree with me, but everybody was playing football. Like everybody was playing either active rock or classic rock, and alternative stations were like the water polo team. Different. You're laughing, but you see where I'm going. You see where I'm going with this. Or we were playing soccer. Let me put it that way. We were playing soccer. It was a worldwide sport.
A counter world.
But it wasn't necessarily huge in the United States of America yet. Yeah. So when these original 7 suddenly got expanded, they had to hire football players to learn how to play soccer.
Right.
And the problem was the football players didn't understand about keeping the ball on the ground and kicking it. They always wanted to pick it up and throw it.
Yeah.
So when these other stations popped up, the list is endless of these stations that popped up across the country, because all these stations, there was 135. It went from like 5 to 135, like overnight.
Well, I could tell you that Quad in 1991, when it first started flirting with alternative music, it was still a CHR in 91. And it was before The End had signed on in Seattle. So it was April 91.
Right.
And it was more like the Jesus Jones, Seal, Crazy, those kind of records.
Right. The CHR part of it.
Yeah, exactly.
The Sherman Cohen part of it.
So it went from CHR to alternative CHR, and then it didn't really start to rock until I came and visited you in 93 for that 10-year anniversary with Big Country.
Right. Iggy.
So then Quad was part of that thing that started to rock, but later on,
right. So what ended up happening, to your point, there was PDs like yourself and these other PDs that had no. I mean, you obviously had some alternative experience prior to that.
Yeah.
College radio?
Well, high school radio. Sam and I were at the same high school radio station, and we did a lot of gigs, high school gigs.
Right. So
and actually, honestly,
and nightclubs.
But you understood what alternative was compared to
way more, because when we both worked at Quad, and we were still, this is 84, 85, it was still top 40. Both of us were begging the music director and the PD, please play Simple Minds, Don't You Forget About Me. It's going to be huge. And he's all, no, it's not.
Which, ironically enough, that's one of those songs that Sherman would go back and play. We were done with it already, and suddenly it's like, that song makes a huge comeback. Not written by Simple Minds, ironically enough.
Right.
But
mass appeal.
Mass appeal. But to your points, suddenly, in other places, there were radio stations that popped up out of nowhere, and they basically started playing the chart, because originally the chart was controlled by the Pure 7 or the Pure 5 or whatever the Ted Volk used to call them. Those stations controlled the charts up until the point where these other stations would start suddenly adding shit like the Nixons. You remember that?
Yeah, they had a couple,
There was a whole bunch of shitty bands that came out, and people went, oh, this sounds like Nirvana. Sponge, not so. Sponge didn't sound like Nirvana.
I like Sponge. In fact, I liked a bunch of those bands. Like
Sponge grew up in the MC5 punk rock era in Detroit. I know those guys pretty well.
Yeah.
They were authentic. They were an amazing rock band. I'll play you a different track that the Sponge guys did.
Besides Molly.
Well, Molly was basically an ode to what's her face,
Molly Ringwald. Yeah.
What's more alternative than that? But,
yeah. Another Sacramento reference. That's where she's from.
So to answer your question, when the charts started being affected by these people who were football players trying to play soccer, that's when dumb bands started getting played on the radio because nobody was saying that band sucks because they went, oh, it sounds like Nirvana. Seven Mary 3 sounds like Nirvana. This sounds like Nirvana. Let's play Sex and Candy. Sounds like Nirvana. Finally, it doesn't.
Finally, the Butthole Surfers have a hit. They become a one-hit wonder on the alternative radio.
Which was the one-hit wonder?
Pepper.
Pepper.
So funny because we played so many more songs from them.
Are they from around here or where?
No, Austin, Texas.
Okay. Because that was the only record we played by them, the only one the label ever pitched to us.
It's the only one that the mainstream knows.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I know 4 or 5 songs by them, but,
You probably went deeper than... One of the things that separated Quad from a lot of these other alternative stations is we actually did do an album format, and I think you did too, where you would look for album cuts when a new album came out, right?
Well, I think part of that was labels had figured out they had to send out a 12-inch first.
Yeah.
Single, here's the song. This is pre-digital delivery. So the 12-inch would arrive, better quality than a 7-inch because it was wider grooves. And we would generally cart them up, send them down to Mexico, and play them. In that era also, some of the labels, they would give us the import 12-inch. Case in point, XTC came out with a new album. They picked up, they wanted to release Grass as the single. They sent us the Grass single on import. It arrived at the radio station, brought it down. Oz played it, I think, the first time at 2, 3 in the afternoon. Here's the new XTC single. I get it around 6, 7 o'clock, and it was supposed to be like People's Choice on like a Monday. And I ended up flipping it over. And on the B-side was this song called Dear God. Not on the album. We didn't know it wasn't on the album. All we knew was I flipped it over and went, wow, this is a pretty cool song. I think I called Max at that time and said, we should play the B-side. And I don't think he was resistant to it, but it ended up, they just got so many freaking requests because it was probably one of the most amazing protest songs of its era. Mm-hmm. And it took off and became so big that the label had to strip it into the actual album that had already been sequenced.
Wasn't that a compilation album that it got put into, like a singles compilation?
Well, it did eventually.
Eventually it did. But originally, they stripped it into the album, had some really weird segue on it. It was just crazy. They took off one song and put this other one in, like CDs that could fit the whole thing in there.
Are you saying that 91X made that a hit? Dear God.
We were the first ones. I was the first one to flip over the thing and play it because in those days I was my show in Detroit was called Radios in Motion, which was an XTC song from their first album because he sings about Milwaukee, where I was born. And basically it was like kids, all the kids are complaining that the songs are too slow. I mean, the song was basically about we want the airwaves. It was like a Ramones song without being called We Want the Airwaves. Mm-hmm. So when I got the chance to name my show, it was originally called Rest Aria, which is an old Resonance song. Judy Adams, my friend who worked at DET at the time, said, you can have your own show. Here's the name. It's going to be on, Friday afternoons, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock in the afternoon on DET, big station in Detroit, NPR affiliate. And I went, great. Wasn't happy with the name, so when I got my own slot that was like on, 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., not a great time slot. She goes, you can call it whatever you want.
I got away with playing whatever I wanted back in that time slot.
You could do it. So this was late 70s, and called it Radios in Motion because the song resonated with me. I didn't think it was going to... It was a theme, basically. I'd play the song so I put that song, it was like 2 minutes and 30 seconds. I'd play it so I could get my other shit together and then start talking about what was going to come up on the show because I had a stack of albums that I was playing at the time. And so when I got to 91X, when that single came in, it was like, well, what's on the B-side? Because as you know, B-sides are sometimes always better than the A-sides.
Yeah, it can
So I
be.
flipped it over, and Dear God became probably number 1, number 2 song that year.
Right on.
You know, we actually played it as a CHR on Quad when the year it came out, and it was more of an overnight show when I was on the air. But it really didn't get a lot of airplay in Sacramento until the 90s when we went alternative.
Right.
And
It came back to haunt a lot of people. Same
Yeah.
thing with when did you start playing the Violent Femmes? Do you remember?
Oh, 90s, definitely 91 on.
But I was talking about the first album. You started playing the first album.
Yeah, we didn't
Added
play.
up.
We didn't
Blister
play.
in the Sun.
We didn't play any of that as a top 40 station. We didn't play any Violent Femmes.
So when you started playing the Violent Femmes, what year did you start playing it?
91.
And what were the songs you played?
American Music was the hit at the time, and so because of that, we went back. I listened to their whole catalog and started picking out, Blister in the Sun. I actually didn't know these songs. I learned it from that group of artists that were big in 91, and just went back and listened to their catalogs, and saw on K-Rock's list, Blister in the Sun was number 1 on their all-time list. Things like that, I think, and meeting with
It's
Mark.
funny. I'll give you the quick story on Blister in the Sun. I was dating a girl called Mary Margiotta at the time. I was working on Detroit radio. She had left Detroit to move to L.A. She was working in Malibu, and she'd make this drive from like somewhere in Santa Monica out to this restaurant she worked at. And she calls me back in Detroit, and she goes, "Hey, there's this song called Blistering Sun, and it's by Violent Femmes. You should find it and play it. It's really good. It's getting a lot of airplay on KXLU, which is loyal Marymount station." So this was probably 82 and 83, right?
Back when it came out,
When it came out.
long
When
before I found out
I
about
can't remember the actual year it came out, but I think it was late 82.
it. Yeah.
So I go into the library, I find it, I start playing it. I ended up leaving DET at one point, moving out to live with Mary in LA, and I went back to Detroit. I started playing it again about 8 months later, and then I got a job at LBS in 84, beginning of 84, January of 84. We started pounding the crap out of it because it took Added Up and Blister in the Sun, and it started, that first Violent Femmes album started outselling Seven and the Ragged Tiger. It started outselling, at the time, Purple Rain was out. It started outselling all these things, and I find out years later from Anna Statman, who signed them to Slash Records. She sent me the original cassette that she'd signed them from, because the original LP was the demos. They just released the demos. Slash released the demos that Mark Van Hecke had produced. And she told me this whole story. I had no idea how it happened, but she was trying to figure out why it was selling in Detroit, because she was getting phone calls from the Tom family, THOM, who owned Harmony House, that distributed to everybody else. So they owned the distributorship, and they owned like a bunch of record stores called Harmony House. They were selling so many copies in Detroit, but they weren't going to do a repressing. So Slash was calling Seattle, calling all these other places, and going, "Send us your copies of the Violent Femmes back." And they would send it back, and they would ship them to Detroit. So it sold so many in Detroit, they finally did a second pressing. I ended up leaving Detroit in 86 and coming out to San Diego, sitting in Tolkoff's office. I pull the album. I go, "How come you're not playing this?" He goes, "It's college, too old, nobody cares." "Can I do an edit?" "What do you want to do an edit for?" "I want to play it." "Okay, fine." "Okay." I mean, you hear him.
Yeah.
"Okay, fine." So I did an edit on Added Up. They all knew what the word was. And the thing was to reverse it or beep it meant that more people wanted to go buy it because it was now the forbidden word.
Right.
So that's what happened with the Femmes. Oh, and then I left in 88 to go to K-Rock, and K-Rock never really played it. I get there, and I bring it with me because I had Jock Choice. Every
Okay.
hour I could play whatever they wanted.
Social music.